Welcome to Crossroads, a show by the Epoch Times where we bring you insights beyond the headlines. As always, don't forget to hit the like button. It helps us get out to more people. Now look, FBI Director Kash Patel has provided Congress with declassified documents saying the Chinese Communist Party may have interfered in the 2020 elections, at least had a plan to. The documents describe an elaborate scheme where they were wanting to use fake driver's licenses and fake mail-in ballots to rig the election. Now, Kash posted about the documents on X, and he wrote, "The FBI has located documents which detail alarming allegations relating to the 2020 elections." It says, including allegations of interference by the CCP. He says, "I have immediately declassified the material and turned the documents over to Chairman Grassley for further review." Now, Epoch Times did some follow-up reporting on this, and Epoch Times reported that Grassley had previously requested that the FBI produce any records in its possession regarding the foreign business dealings of former President Joe Biden's family, all of whom were pardoned, but Trump may overturn those. And that includes, it says, their ties to companies linked to the CCP. Were they getting money from China? You know, it's former Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, who currently serves as the Central Intelligence Agency's Director, CIA, alleged in a 2021 letter to Congress that the Chinese regime interfered in the 2020 election. Huge stuff out of the CIA, folks. And notes in the letter, Ratcliffe wrote that based on all available sources with intelligence, with definitions consistently applied and reached independent of political considerations or undue pressure, the People's Republic of China, the PRC, the government of the Chinese regime, sought to influence the 2020 U.S. federal elections. Massive stuff. Now it notes, Ratcliffe alleged that intelligence about China's election interference was suppressed by management at the CIA, which pressured analysts to withdraw their support for the view. You were not allowed to bring that forward, even though it was, again, there. And notes this, citing reports by the intelligence community's analytics system, Barry Zuloff, Ratcliffe said that some analysts were reluctant to describe the Chinese regime's actions as election interference. Why, you might ask? It says, because the analysts disagreed with Trump's policies. Hey, they disagree with Trump's policies. Yeah, China's trying to rig our elections, but you know what? Maybe they supported the other guy, right? Now, Just the News was able to get more details on the documents that were just handed over by the FBI to Congress. Just the News said this: the newly declassified intelligence reports from August of 2020 were not corroborated or fully investigated, and instead were recalled from intelligence agencies at about the time that then FBI Director Chris Wray testified there were no known plots of foreign interference ahead of the 2020 election in which Biden defeated Donald Trump, officials told Just the News. And of course, if you made that statement and there was intelligence, that's a big deal, but they got rid of it right before that. So we'll see what happened with that. And notes further in, Kash Patel told Just the News in a statement, quote, "To that end, we have located documents Chairman Grassley requested." What documents did he request? He requested one specifically about Chinese ties to, again, the Biden family. Maybe he requested ones in the election also directly. We don't know. And notes which detail alarming allegations related to the 2020 U.S. election. And he adds specifically, these include allegations of plans from the CCP to manufacture fake driver's licenses and ship them into the United States for the purpose of facilitating fraudulent mail-in ballots. Allegations which, while substantiated, were abruptly recalled and never disclosed to the public, Patel also said. Remember, we were told it was the most secure election in American history, not according to intelligence analysts who were silenced within their own agencies. Now it adds this, quote, "In accordance with Chairman Grassley's request for documents, I have immediately declassified the material and turned the document over to the chairman for further review. It notes officials who have seen the documents told Just the News the FBI had a relatively new confidential source who provided information in the summer 2020 that the Chinese government was manufacturing and exporting fake U.S. driver's licenses as part of a plot to create voter identities for Chinese residents living in the United States so they could vote with fake mail-in ballots. Chinese agents casting fake votes to rig our election. In other words, it adds this as well. The intelligence source claimed the plot was specifically designed to benefit Biden, officials said. And it says they also said the intelligence report was recalled within a few weeks and the allegations never fully investigated on the grounds that the source needed to be re-reviewed. But in fact, it notes another agency, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, had intercepted nearly 20,000 fake licenses around the time the intelligence came in and is a possible corroboration of the report, officials said. You're getting that. So one guy was saying, hey, the CCP is going to make fake driver's licenses, send them to the U.S., and they're going to fake people's identities and then rig the election. They silenced that guy, got rid of all the reports, and then they found a shipment from China fitting the exact description of fake licenses, and they never decided to re-look into it. Now, look, details on all of this are still thin, but we can expect to hear probably a lot more about this. This does suggest that Congress is now moving to investigate the claims. Congress is looking into it. And it's likely that if Congress is looking into it, and a lot of the countries watching this now, they could call people to testify about these allegations. Why did you get rid of the confidential source? Why did you not take the shipment of driver's licenses as a corroborating factor to the claims of the source? Where were those fake driver's licenses heading? Why did you not arrest the people who would have received them? Did you monitor them? Did they rig the elections? We could get answers on all of this. Now, it's not clear yet on whether the FBI or the DOJ are investigating as well, but the fact that FBI Director Kash Patel says the documents have now been discovered, it is likely the issue is at least on their radar. We'll see if they go further with it. Again, we don't yet know. Now, on to another topic. Young men are facing a crisis impacting their health, both physical and mental. Recent polls show that men are suffering from a loneliness epidemic. It's actually men and women, but men are getting much worse with it apparently. And it's also getting worse with younger generations. And this isn't even just an issue in the United States. There's a global crisis of men. Now look, it's pretty serious among women also, but what's tied to this is a growing problem of seclusion. Now, New York Post was talking about this in May, and noted that a Gallup poll at the time revealed that American men are the loneliest people. To conduct their poll, researchers collected data from 2023 to 2024, and they discovered that U.S. Gen Z and millennial men are the loneliest, 25% compared to only 18% of American women in the same age group. I'd say 18% is still pretty dang high, but it adds this. That means that 1 in 4 American men under 35 feel more isolated than their peers in other countries, including France, Canada, Ireland, and Spain. Although this group seems to be the loneliest, it says that isn't to say the same demographic in other countries aren't also feeling secluded, and for similar reasons. And it's the Gallup study, and Fortune well reported that 1 in 5 young men in places like Turkey, France, Ireland, and Canada are reportedly feeling just as alone. And this common feeling of isolation, it says, is the coming to a head of a set of forces that have been in existence in boys' and men's lives for generations. Psychologist Michael Reichart, founding director of the Center for Study of Boys and Girls' Lives at the University of Pennsylvania, and author of How to Raise a Boy, The Power of Connection to Build Good Men, told Fortune well. Now, they said this, quote, "The problem, of course, is that when they become less authentic, they alienated themselves from even their important relationships, feeling that they had to hide a part of themselves because the world didn't want that from them." And they say this goes all the way down to age 4, Reichart said. So, issues that have plagued men, probably for most of history, have been made worse by the problems of the modern world, like video games and porn and so on, right? And notes as the report goes into this This problem has been around for a while. It's an old problem that's made worse by, again, the let's say, encroachment of digital entertainment in the digital world overall. But the problem was made especially bad during the COVID-19 lockdowns. That was kind of the perfect storm that just entrenched all of this. New York Post said this: as the coronavirus pandemic slips into the rear view, the effects of the alone virus epidemic continue to fuel mental and physical health woes. It says the World Health Organization declared loneliness a pressing health threat, with risks as deadly as smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. Being lonely, that type of mental anguish, it's like being a chain smoker, basically. Now look, again, this isn't just a problem of young men, it's also women. Women are also suffering from loneliness and isolation. But young men have become a particular focus because it tends to impact them in more serious ways. It does worse things to them, apparently. Now, part of this also has to do with the expectations of men. The social perception that men should not be moved by such things, that they shouldn't be so emotional, that they need to man up, right? But other studies show men are actually more affected by emotional challenges than women are. Now, women might more express it, in the open. Men keep it in, and it turns into other things. And this is to the extent they're even more likely to die from it. Men are dying from loneliness. New York Post said this: when a loved one passes on and your heart aches, there's actually a name for that. And apparently, men are more likely to die from it. Now, notes the technical term for broken heart syndrome is Takotsubo cardiopathy. And people are diagnosed with it when stress hormones like adrenaline prevent their hearts from properly contracting. It notes it's a serious condition brought on by very stressful situations and extreme emotions that doctors don't take lightly. It notes that while women are more known to often suffer from the syndrome, men are the ones actually dying from it at more than twice the rate, according to a new study published in the Journal of the American Heart Association. It notes as well an interesting point the study made is that broken heart syndrome is triggered by emotional stress predominantly in women or physical stress predominantly in men. Now, again, everyone deals with challenges like this. I don't think it's like one side or the other, and I'm sure there are some women who would take it pretty hard as well. But men overall seem to not deal with it as well. And, couple that emotional challenge with the crisis of increased isolation, and it becomes an even bigger problem. Of course, even again, mental issues, which can turn to other things. But facing this, interestingly, there's another shift taking place. As men are dealing with this, young men are looking for help. But more and more, they're actually turning to God. There's now a religious resurgence taking place. Financial Times said this: finding their religion, why Gen Z are turning to faith as spiritual belief shows signs of a quiet revival in Britain. It's not just the UK, it's actually global. And it notes, has Christianity regained the underground appeal of its earliest days? Slowly, slightly, faith is trickling back, at least into Britain, it says. There's something in the water. Religion is civilized table talk. Even non-believers mourn the death of Pope Francis, with secularism yet to devise a credible alternative as the world's moral conscience. The pews are filling up, notably with young people. Gen Z's attendance, it says, at church has quadrupled in recent years from a small base, but the significance lies more in the direction of travel. Now look, that one's about the UK. It's not limited to just the UK. This is a global shift, including right here in the United States. Axios said this: Christianity is starting to make a comeback in the US and other Western countries led by young people. Data from Pew shows that for decades, each age group has been less Christian than the one before it. People were saying, religion's going out the back door. Turns out it is not. It's coming back. It's Americans born in the 1970s are 63% Christian. 1980s babies are 53% Christian. 1990s babies are 46% Christian. But there was no decline from the 1990s to the 2000s. Americans born in the 2000s are also 46% Christian. Gen Zers, it says, especially Gen Z men, are actually more likely to attend weekly religious services than than millennials and even some younger Gen Xers, Burge analysis shows. And notes between the lines, young men are leading America's religion resurgence. Within older generations, there's a consistent gender gap among Christians, with women more likely to be religious than men, interestingly. It notes as well, within Gen Z, the gap is closed as young men join the church and young women leave it. If the current trajectory sticks, it says the gender gap will flip. So interesting changes. Now, that religious resurgence ties into a lot of other issues. Part of it has to do with how young people are finding hope, and they're also finding meaning. It's how they're coping with the challenges of the world and finding a new purpose in life. They're turning to older traditions, they're looking back instead of forward, and they're saying, what did we lose as a society? And they're trying to recover it. But the broader picture isn't just a personal shift, including in politics, right? Young Americans overall, they're also becoming more conservative. I'll be talking more about this shift after we come back from a quick break. And don't forget, hit the like button if you're enjoying the show.
All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment. You are, of course, watching Crossroads with Joshua Philipp. I'm just here to share a message about American Hartford Gold, my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. Now, obviously, the recent tariffs have made the markets super turbulent and volatile. With every new piece of tariff news, the markets seem to either crash up or crash down. And of course, it's worth mentioning that these conditions don't only affect Wall Street. They affect all of us through our investments and our retirement accounts. That's why I'd like to introduce you to a company that I trust and I myself use to secure my own savings, American Hartford Gold. They specialize in helping Americans move our assets into something tangible, into something you can actually hold, which is physical gold and physical silver, two precious metals that act as a hedge against all those decisions being made in Washington, D.C. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They have thousands of 5-star reviews, and they make the whole buying process super simple. Your metals can be shipped directly to your door, or you can transfer your current retirement account to a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And the best part is that right now, American Hartford Gold is offering an exclusive offer. When you call them today and you mention the name Joshua, you could receive up to $15,000 in free silver with your initial investment. Take advantage of their special offer. You can either just call them at 877-260-2764 or text Joshua to 65532. All their information will also be down in the description box below. And now, back to Crossroads.
Welcome back to Crossroads. Support independent journalism by liking this video, sharing this episode, and subscribing to our channel. Every bit helps us to get more people and reach out more. We've been kind of suppressed for a good while, but we're coming back, folks. Now, look, we're seeing a broad shift in politics right now. Young Americans overall, aside from becoming more lonely, more religious, they're also becoming more conservative, interestingly. Recent polling shows that around 52.7% of people aged 18 to 29 support President Donald Trump. And that's a big change because it used to be the opposite. It used to be that young people tend to be very, very liberal. Not anymore. Now, Newsweek noted, quote, the conservative trend among Gen Z voters, especially young men, appears to be solidifying during Trump's second term, even more so than before, potentially reshaping American politics for years to come. Maybe they're becoming entrenched in that, and the shift in the country, it's not going to flip the other way. Now, that's a big deal, given it used to be assumed that younger people tended to lean left. They used to tend to lean more Democrat when they were younger. That's why they're trying to even lower the voting age, by the way. And this shift, which likely played into the outcomes of the last election, has Democrats even trying to figure out how can they possibly reach young men. They launched a big campaign for it even. The Blaze talked about it, said Democrats have a man problem. And now they're spending $20 million in a study examining how to speak to their problem demographic after losing major ground with them during the 2024 election cycle. It notes, according to the New York Times, Speaking with American Men, a strategic plan, it was created by the party to, quote, study the syntax, language, and content that gains attention and virality in these spaces of male voters. And they said, quote, I don't know what could possibly be the reason for that at all. Blaze TV host Steve Berger said on Stu Does America. and added, you know, they all just seem so masculine. Think of the masculinity part of a Pete Buttigieg for a second, okay? I mean, how do you get more masculine than that? He's joking, of course. Now, the study also recommends buying advertisements in video games, to which Stu laughs and says, oh my God. The report did not turn out so well, by the way. They're looking for ways to reach young men and saying, how do we become cool among young men? Now, if you were to ask me, it's a hard thing to do because what were they saying maybe 10 years ago? They were saying toxic masculinity is the biggest problem. Before there was the trans movement, before there's everything else, it was the narrative of toxic masculinity. If you're a man, especially a white man, you're not even allowed to speak in some cases. And people who've been silenced, who've been pushed to the side, who've been demonized, well, to win them back is going to be a very hard journey. It's going to take a lot to win them back. And especially when the images of masculinity have gone the other way. It is also true that guys who are more physically fit and have higher testosterone levels, they also tend to lean conservative. And so, of course, they need to find more folks like that on their side if they want to win them over. We'll see how all of this goes. The DNC, by the way, they've been trying a few different figureheads for promoting this. For example, they have Pete Buttigieg as an image of manhood. They've been trying David Hogg as one of the key figures. They're trying to push him out now. During the 2024 election, the hope was to have Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as Kamala Harris's running mate, also with the hopes that Tim Walz could win over men. They were saying, look, he hunts. Look how masculine he is. Don't you want to vote for us, right? Of course, they tried that. It didn't work so well. They didn't really win over the demographic. Now, so far, this whole campaign kind of didn't really go anywhere. They're not able to find a way to reach young men still. And some are pointing to the long-running problem of messaging. And what has the message been? Young men have been largely rejected and attacked. They were called toxic. They were said that masculinity is the problem. They were saying you need to be less manly, right? There was a huge campaign on this for years. And for a lot of these young men, that was when they were teenagers. That was when they were, 8 years old, 10 years old, 12 years old. They were raised in a school system that shoved this down their throats, and they're rebelling against it. There was a narrative of men being systematically problematic. How many times have you seen arguments where a man gets shut down by someone saying, excuse me, you're a man, meaning if you're a man, you should not have a voice. Men have been rejected based on gender. They've been criticized, attacked. And many also feel the system has flipped, that these days the system is even rigged against them when it comes to relationships. Again, if there's an accusation on one side, the men tend to get automatically assumed as guilty versus the other side. And a lot of men are just not wanting to have the risk anymore. There's problems of employment where they can be discriminated against based on their gender. There's politics, of course, which are also calling them every bad name in the book. And because of this, many of them are checking out. They're flipping to the other side, whether it means, kind of locking down in their houses, never seeing the light of the sun, or whether it means they're turning to other things like religion, for example, trying to find inner meaning and other things. And politically, we're also seeing this, by the way. As young men were rejected by progressive politics, many turned conservative. And this even crossed different races. It's not even just one or the other. It's even leading many Democrats to become Trump supporters, by the way. ESPN host Stephen A. Smith noted as much during an appearance on Fox News' Hannity 2 weeks ago. Watch this.
When you look at the state of affairs right now, I'm looking at Newsweek just a few days ago. Trump is gaining traction within the Democratic Party. Black voters, young voters, he did it during the election, but it seems to be, the trajectory seems to be going in a forward direction. You pointed to the...
And look, all of this is presenting a real political challenge right now. As the Democrat Party looks for ways to appeal to men, they're also looking at a possible remaking of the entire party. They're saying, how can we get enough voters to win the next election? And they're saying, what issues do our constituents care about? How can we win more people? Because not only do they need to get all their current base voting, they need to get people they lost. And there are two directions to this. On one side, well, there's the further left socialist side. That's AOC, that's Bernie Sanders. and again, Democratic Socialists of America. Some believe that's their key to success, that if they get that going to the forefront, maybe they'll capture the middle. The problem is that side has represented policies that have pushed a lot of people away. A lot of people say, I didn't leave the Democrat Party left me. It shifted so far left, they lost the middle. But there's again a large faction trying to push that. The other side is going for the middle. They're saying, you know what, maybe we should reject the extremities of the party, go back to the middle, and then maybe we will capture middle of the road voters. Capture all those people who say that, again, the party left them. And interestingly, many are saying that if you catch the middle, well, maybe you'll win a lot more voters. Maybe you'll get the people who say, I kind of like Trump's policies, but I don't like his character. Maybe they'll get them back. And the clock is ticking on this, especially with the midterm elections coming up soon. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, who was the former vice presidential candidate, he noted this as well during remarks to South Carolina Democrats on May 31st. Watch this.
We got to be honest with ourselves. We're in this mess. We know who Trump is. He told us, and he does it every day. But we're in this mess, too, because we lost our way. We lost our way a bit as a party. The Democratic Party that was the party of the working class, we lost a big chunk of the working class in this last election. And the thing that bothers me to no end and drives me to do something about it, we didn't just lose the working class, we lost the working class to a billionaire. This last election, you could hear the primal scream of folks. Working class folks were in pain. They were yelling from the top of their lungs, do something. Do something. The system's not fair. You can't own a home. I can't get health care. I'm worried about my kids. I'm worried about gun violence.
Now, we're going to have to see how all that works out. The question is, was it just the far left policies that pushed men away? In particular, the gender and race politics and those things. And another big question is whether older Democrat policies will still work on younger generations. Gun control, pro-abortion policies, that's kind of the bread and butter of the Democrat Party. A push for, single-payer health care, maybe that's what they want. We don't know. Maybe going back to older policies of trying to appeal to working-class Americans. Interestingly, the path that Trump is taking. Or do they need a broader rebrand to capture people back? We will see. That said, folks, if you have questions, comments, leave them in the chat. Let's jump into some questions. Emotion 007, you're saying the CCP has a saying translated to, enough money can buy a saint. Yeah. So back to the first story today. Again, Kash Patel provided documents to Congress, Chuck Grassley, and they're alleging that they had intelligence that the Chinese Communist Party had a plot to rig the 2020 elections. They were going to use, again, fake IDs, and they were going to use those to get fake mail-in ballots or fraudulent ones, and then fraudulently vote in our elections. Remember, it was the most secure election in history, right? On that point, though, the CCP is saying money can buy even a saint. So this is the thinking of Chinese espionage. Chinese espionage, or Chinese Communist Party espionage, I should say, it's based on almost like a devil's advocate type strategy. It's based on this idea that everybody has a flaw, and they will find that flaw and exploit it. Maybe you are susceptible to power, right? You desire power and influence. Well, they might help your YouTube channel grow. They might help promote you on, on social media or something like that. Epoch Times actually uncovered a large network of fake, they were banned, CCP-tied accounts that were boosting New York Times propaganda against Shen Yun. Again, the CCP is trying to shut down Shen Yun. New York Times is doing it for them, basically, running hit pieces, and Chinese Communist Party linked accounts were boosting it. Again, they will help you grow. They'll help you expand if you do what they want them to. That's one of the things they do. Maybe you're weak to lust, right? Maybe you can resist when you're in your normal state of mind. They'll get you drunk. They'll drug you, other things like that. Maybe you can resist one person. What about 2 or 3 or 4, right? They will do that to you if you travel to China. And then, of course, they'll blackmail you with it. Well, they'll hand you a nice Maybe they'll hand you a little package, say, oh, thank you for visiting. You open it up and there's going to be a little gold bar and a little USB stick, and you can choose which one you want. The USB stick will have the material videotapes of you which are incriminating. And they'll say, you know what? You can pick which one. Do you want the honey or do you want the bullet, right? Effectively saying, look, you can work with us and you'll get rich, or you can go to jail. Which do you choose? When it comes again to bribery and issues like that, though, the concept of all of this is everybody has a threshold of which they can endure. You might have a very honest person, but if you leave them alone in a building and you leave $1 million on the table, how many people are going to take one little wad of that cash? How many people can resist temptation? That is the idea. And the idea is, no matter how good your character is, you're going to have a flaw. They will find that flaw, and they will try to exceed the limits of what you can endure in order to make you fold and give in and sell out. Chinese espionage is very, very deviant. Again, it manipulates human moral flaws. And I can tell you right now, we are looking into some stuff around this. We believe that even within the U.S. government, the Chinese Communist Party has special agents. Even within government agencies, the CCP has paid off agents or planted agents. Something, of course, we are looking into aggressively right now, by the way. Science Chick 72, you're saying when a regime is toppled, the power vacuum left always makes things worse, especially in Middle East, e.g. Libya, Syria, etc. Yeah, so you're talking about the whole war right now between Iran and Israel. So I want to clarify a couple things on that. I saw some fake reports going around. I think people misinterpreted some text message or some post Trump made and so on. So a lot of people are now saying the United States is engaged in the war. And it sounds like we're fighting now. This is based off a post where Trump says we now control the skies, American equipment is so good and so on. The actual context of what Trump is talking about in that, Trump has been saying that the power of Israel, the Iron Dome, the missiles they have, the targeted capabilities, it's all American weaponry that we supply them with. They're using American equipment. And so Trump is basically saying, yeah, they're doing pretty well, but they're doing well because we gave that to them. Currently, the United States is not engaged in the war. It does appear that we are, I should say, not directly engaged. We are playing, it seems, a kind of behind-the-scenes role where we're supplying them with weapons. We're supplying them with the very expensive interceptors for the Iron Dome. Those things are crazy expensive. And we're supplying them with the other, again, a lot of the defense spending. A lot of Israel's defense is given to them by the United States. And so you could say on that ground we're engaged, but it's not a direct engagement. It seems also the U.S. is involved to some extent on kind of the, looking at the targets or the intel type side. That has been hinted at. They haven't talked too much about it. But I do think right now the goal of the Trump administration is more to try to stop this from becoming a broader war. They don't want Lebanon joining. They don't want Pakistan joining. They don't want Russia joining or China joining or Syria joining. Currently, as things stand, all other nations are not getting engaged either. This is just Israel and Iran. But of course, the other side of it, the Chinese Communist Party is playing a very similar role the U.S. is, but instead of supplying Israel, they're supplying Iran. So the CCP is supplying Iran, the U.S. supplying Israel with weapons, and so you're watching basically a proxy war take place on that front. Interestingly, there were some reports going around. There were Chinese shipments, Chinese airplanes, that diverted their course and allegedly went to Iran. And a lot of people are now wondering, well, is the CCP doing some kind of weird secret operation where they're giving something to Iran? What these Chinese planes did, they turned off their transponders that track them. And that's important because people who've been following oil news know that Chinese ships are doing the same thing. And they're doing it to avoid sanctions. So when they want to make shipments to a sanctioned country like Iran, for example, they go nearby, they turn off their transponder, they go invisible on radar, and then they go and do the delivery. They call these black ships when they're supplying oil or breaking embargoes or whatever else like that, or violating sanctions. The CCP appears to be doing that for Iran right now, as we speak. I know a lot of people are saying, are we going to war? Is this World War III? I will say pretty confidently no. It would be war if Israel was probably losing and the United States wanted to help. Currently, the Iron Dome is basically shooting down almost everything Iran has, and Israel has mostly decapitated the Iranian leadership. The general population in Iran does not support the regime. There's been a disconnect between the people and the regime for a long time. Not everybody, but the majority. And so even their war-fighting capabilities are deeply limited. And to the extent that they kill the Ayatollah or something like that, or kill the supreme leader, Israel wants to do it. Trump has been discouraging them from killing the leader of Iran. Trump actually told them to not do it. Israel has destroyed most of the military leadership. It's not clear yet on the supreme leader. There were actually this morning reports coming out that some people believe that they might have just killed him. We don't know yet. The context of that, he gave a public address, and then Israel launched a strike in the area where he is known to be right after he gave that televised speech. And some people believe that maybe they were able to triangulate him and strike it. We don't know. Trump has been trying to stop that from happening. In terms of leadership change, it depends on who seizes control of the trajectory. I know people say, and it is true, look, when we have cut off the leadership of countries in that region, I don't think it's ever turned out well. Killing Gaddafi in Libya did not turn out well for Libya or the region. Leadership decapitation in other countries led to the rise of ISIS, which was even worse than the pre-existing regimes. Again, you could say that, hey, we never saw a repeat of 9/11, so that is something. But again, the global terror networks are still pretty terrible. It didn't work out so well for Afghanistan, didn't work out so well for Iraq, although, they're not causing too many problems right now. Some people suggest that even killing Saddam Hussein helped destabilize the region. When it comes into the country-by-country battles, Saddam Hussein would have been the counterbalance probably to Iran, neither of which would probably be friendly to the United States, but that was part of the counterbalance. And so I know some people are saying, well, gee, this hasn't worked out so well before. Why do we keep doing it? So Trump is trying to get Israel to not do it. They might have done it. We will see. The other side of that, though, other countries, to be honest, tend to be a little better at leadership change than we are because they'll puppeteer the new government. America, we don't really, as far as we know, we don't really do that. I'd say quite the opposite. We tend to allow regimes to come into place that are very critical of us, actually. In terms of Iran, it does appear they have a government in waiting, and they're a unique country because of this. They're a unique country because the Iranian Revolution was only in the late 70s. It was a student-led, communist-type revolution that installed the, again, current leadership of Iran. Prior to that, if you would have seen Iran before the revolution, you could have mistaken it for Southern California. Women in bikinis, people going to discos, that kind of thing. It looked like a Western country. And so when they launched the revolution, they pushed out the existing leadership, including the king, including the crown prince. The crown prince is still alive. The crown prince is saying he wants to come into power, he wants to retake the country, and he wants to turn it into a democracy. And so we'll see how that goes. But there is a promise of a regime change that will bring democracy to Iran. And if they have a living crown prince, You know, I mean, look, a lot of countries in that region have kings and princes. Saudi Arabia is a great example of that. They have a lot of princes, actually. That could actually convert Iran into a country probably more similar to like Saudi Arabia. In terms of religious divides, they would still have troubles because you have different denominations of Islam that don't necessarily get along with each other. And so you would probably see a different type of government come into place. But if they're anything like Iran before the Iranian Revolution, they would be a much better country. And interestingly as well, there were reports coming out last night. In fact, I've been following it on this. I didn't want to go too deep on it because there's no major updates. Just a lot of there's a lot of noise and a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of fake information. But one of the big things that took place is that some of the surviving military leadership in Iran is trying to reach out to the Crown Prince. And if they're able to get in touch with the Crown Prince and they work on a regime change, then you're going to see possibly the Crown Prince become immediately the new leader. And if Israel's involved, they're probably going to be involved in those discussions as well. And they're pretty good at that kind of stuff, to be honest. If they're involved, you will probably see them, work with the Crown Prince if they can make a deal with him, and possibly they will even back the regime change. I don't know how involved they would be on that, but if they can make a peace deal, that will eliminating the current Iranian regime from the world picture would make things very different. A lot of the conflicts in the Middle East, a lot of terrorism funding, that would be, goodbye to Hezbollah, goodbye to Hamas, which is why I think Israel wants it very much. They don't want to have a global battle against Hezbollah especially. That would be that. In terms of what that would also mean, though, it would mean the terrorists no longer have their money and they're looking for new sources of money. If you were to ask me what would happen, the real global sponsor of terrorism is not Iran. The real global sponsor of terrorism is the Chinese Communist Party, but they do it by proxy of Iran. And so I would imagine you will watch the Chinese Communist Party step in, and they'll try to funnel money through a new third party. And maybe it'll be, the Taliban or something like that. Who knows? Or maybe they'll do it through Pakistan or another country like that. I could see them doing that. The CCP still has, deep roots in some areas. And what you're going to have is with leadership decapitation, those terror networks, the biggest one being Hezbollah, will look for a new channel. And someone is going to take that up. Who will that be? We don't know. But I guarantee you the Chinese Communist Party will try to do it. And so that will be the other side of it. And so we'll see. Again, my personal analysis, right? TMA, you're saying common sense is now defined as conservatism. I don't want to be mean, but it is true there are different perceptions of reality. And, there's a lot of fake news reporting these days that is just a straight unfortunate truth. A lot of the mainstream media is not very honest. A lot of it is emotional rhetoric. Now, was it always that way? No. Actually, I'd say classical liberalism is closer to modern conservatism. The modern conservative in the United States would have previously been called a classical liberal. You're talking like John Locke. You're talking the American founding fathers who overthrew their government and instituted a new one heavily based on the ideas of John Locke and his book On Liberty. Individuals like Frederick Bastiat, a classical liberal. Economic theories, mainly Austrian economics, Ludwig von Mises, Rothbard, others, classical liberals. Classical liberalism is actually the basis of the American system, but also of modern conservatives. Whereas tyranny, more tyrannical systems, centralized power, and so on, that's unfortunately what you see on the other side. And I know the debate on this is kind of all over the place because the spectrum of how you define right and left is deeply skewed these days. There are different interpretations of it. Some people say, well, the far left is communism and the far right is fascism. Many classical thinkers would point out communism and fascism are almost the same thing. It's almost the same thing. Controls on free speech, controls on guns, controls on liberty, centralized control, main party leads everything. They're all based on socialism. Yes, Mussolini was one of the most influential socialists of his time. Hitler was the head of the National Socialist Party, which was the Nazis. They're socialists. They're all socialists. And they're almost no different in terms of practice. The Nazi system had centralized control of all businesses. The idea of state capitalism, where the government controls the systems of capitalism, in other words, state capitalism, the state controls the capitalistic system, meaning they control the businesses. The Chinese Communist Party did it, the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia did it, the Soviets did it. The Nazis did it. And the way the Nazis did it was they had what are called shopkeepers. So the Nazi regime seized control of the shops, the businesses, and then assigned the leader of the shop, the business. It was the same thing they did in every communist country. No different. Some people say, well, the difference is nationalism versus internationalism. Every communist regime is both nationalistic internally and globalistic externally. The Chinese Communist Party, massively nationalist internally, massively globalist externally. They want to control the world, but they want to have their, system of control within. The North Korean regime, hugely nationalistic, but also a communist country. You can look, for example, at Ceausescu, Romania, massively nationalistic, also a communist country. The Soviets, massively nationalistic, also a communist country. With, again, the Comintern, the Communist International, being the globalistic agenda. Chinese Communist Party today, other regimes today, internally deeply nationalistic, externally, they want what's called the multipolar world order. They have a globalist agenda as well. It has never changed. So that argument does not work. And so how do you then draw the difference between right and left if that entire narrative is fake? Well, a lot of people draw it on the spectrum of power. So far right would technically be anarchy. You believe in no government. Far left would be absolute tyranny. You believe in absolute government. And on the far left, you would place communism, and you would place fascism. Slightly to the right of that would be socialism, but not very far to the right of it. And so all of the tyrannical systems of government would be far left. All of them. The Nazis, the fascists, the communists, the socialists, they'd all be almost within an inch of each other, right next to each other on the political spectrum. Modern conservatism, which would be classical liberalism, would be very centrist. It's the idea that you again have a constitutional republic that works as the Constitution working as the unchanging basis of the values, the structure of government, and the government protections on individual liberty. That's centrist. And of course, unfortunately, I'd say centrism today is framed as extremism, which is crazy to think about, right? To the further right on the spectrum of towards anarchy, you'd have like libertarianism, that kind of thing. But really, if you understand the political spectrum, it is true that conservatism would be more centrist in terms, again, of political power. And when I talk about that, I'm referring to, again, more of a constitutional centrist viewpoint, which I believe it has come to more represent, actually. Denise B., you're saying, hopefully young people are beginning to recognize how they're being manipulated by the left, particularly by the CCP. I think they are, actually. And I think to understand that, it's important to understand, okay, so what was the thinking of the counterculture movements in the past? So my generation, what did you have? You had a lot of church moms and stuff, and you had a very strict religious culture in the United States when I was a kid still. The 1980s, you had the satanic panic and stuff like that. Personally, I believe that there was some truth to some of those cases, personally. If you don't believe me, you can read the book called, what was it called? It was about the Boys Town, USA case. I think that was extremely solid. I think there was quite a bit with that. But to that point, during those days, you had a very church-centric thing. If a movie came out and it was not morally very good, you'd have moms come out and protest it. If a video game had violence in it, you had, on television, on the talk shows, people were criticizing it. You had a lot of that stuff. And there were a lot of kids who rebelled because of that. The kids rebelled against what they saw as the restrictive nature of their home lives or of the culture. And so you had counterculture. A lot of rebellion took place. These days, who are the ones telling everybody what to do? Who are the ones trying to criticize all the kids, saying, don't do this, don't do that, don't say this, don't think this? Who are the ones saying that? It used to be the right, now it's the left, right? And so instead now of saying, how dare you watch a bad movie? How dare you listen to music with naughty language and that kind of thing, right? That was the old thing. These days, it's how dare you support Donald Trump? How dare you wear a MAGA hat? How dare you believe there's only two genders? What a fascist, right? And so they get labeled all these things. How dare you speak to a woman when you're a man? How dare you? You're a white male. Why would you ever think that? You oppressor. And, from like the time they're in kindergarten and stuff. So kids have been dealing with that. And so what you have now is kids are rebelling against the new tyranny. Only the tyranny is from the other side of the aisle. The new counterculture, it's becoming cool to be religious. I actually know that the same thing has been happening in China. A lot of younger people, they're becoming religious. There's a huge Christian revival in China as well, which is also why the CCP has been increasing its persecution of Christians as of late. They're also afraid of that. The CCP, it doesn't matter what religion it is. As long as it's a good religion, they will persecute it. That's the way the Chinese Communist Party works. And so on that point, I do think you're having a revival take place among young people. And it's also a rejection against communism. It's a rejection against communism overall. And I also believe they're also becoming very clear about the Chinese Communist Party, maybe slowly but surely. But I'm not saying it's all, positive. You definitely have some who watch these YouTubers or TikTokers doing these like brainwashing tours in China. And so they're just getting, force-fed Chinese Communist Party propaganda, and they don't have the discernment to understand the truth that isn't being hidden, of course. They don't have the proper exposure to information to understand it. And so you're seeing that as well. It's not like black and white on this. Ashley from California, you're saying, how do we fix the social destruction technology that helped create in our society when more immersive technology is here to stay? People can live in a virtual world and have meaningful conversations with AI. I don't like it one bit. I can tell you the way I see things going. When I see, so the future, I believe, of technology is going to be augmented reality. The glasses you put on that will augment into your surroundings a digital world. So the Meta AI, the Meta goggles they're making, the glasses, you can have fake friends in your environment. You can play video games. You can augment it so that it's like you're sitting in a movie theater and you're watching a movie, but it's, again, within the glasses. In other words, they're glasses now that merge artificial reality, right? AI, those artificial reality goggles, while you're still able to see the real world. And so it puts both. It augments into the real world the digital world. That's going to be a big thing. They're already saying they want to have it so that the majority of your friends will be artificial intelligence. You'll be hanging out with somebody and they might be having a conversation and you don't see the person there, but they do. Because they're talking to an AI illusion. It's fake. You might be sitting with somebody and they're busy doing something and they're just wearing glasses, but they're playing a video game or they're watching a movie. And there are going to be people with even AI digital workspaces where they have augmented reality glasses on, and they're typing on a table. There's no keyboard there, but within the augmented space, in their field of view, they have a keyboard and they're typing on it. You're going to have that. You're going to have people who can put windows in buildings that look at brick walls that are not there, and it shows them a fake vision of the world. You're going to have this, and it's already here. I don't like it one bit, personally. I don't like it one bit. I think it goes into you know what it reminds me of? It's like when you have a zoo and you have the enclosure, and you have the lion enclosure, and they paint a picture of the jungle on the brick wall. To me, that's what augmented reality is. It's the painting on the brick wall. It's not real. And it might make you feel, oh, hey, remember where we used to be. It's just like being there. No, it is not. And I think people are going to I think you're going to have a new type of emptiness take place. And I think people are really going to struggle to find meaning within that emptiness. I think if you've ever seen like there were artists who did renditions of the future of this, and you have people sitting in like dirty homes and squalor, like looking like crack addicts, and they have AI goggles on, and they're watching a different world, right? The world they're watching is not the real world. And I think it's going to be when they take off those glasses, right? When they take those glasses off, they're going to see a dirty environment. They're going to see that the window they put on the wall does not exist. They're going to see that all those fake AI avatars and everything, that they're fake. They're not there. And they're going to want to go back into that digital world over and over and over again, because they're building a life in a fake reality. That is not a future I want. I really don't want that future. But that being said, you don't have to do it, right? And I personally never plan to. There's that. And I also think that the other side of it too. I think what you'll watch is you'll see a split. You will see some people go full on into that, and you'll see a lot of people who don't. You're going to watch that split take place. And those who go into it, I hope they find a way out of it. Those who don't, I think will seek authenticity. And interestingly, you already see this movement taking place among young people. Aside from everything else I mentioned today, do you know that flip phones are making a comeback? Remember flip phones? Flip phones that are not smartphones. Flip phones where you can text message and make phone calls, and that's about it. And why are kids going back to flip phones? It's because they no longer want social media. They no longer want the stress of it. They no longer want to deal with that stuff. You have a rejection taking place among certain segments of younger generations. You have movements taking place where moms, mothers, are bringing landlines back to their houses. Remember landlines? When you had to have your phone wired into the wall, and it had I don't know, maybe they'll have wireless ones still, but landlines, right? They're bringing landlines back. No more smartphones. People are bringing it back. You are having some people seeking out authenticity yet again. And so you have a split taking place in society right now. One is going, I believe, in a very bad direction. One is going a very good direction. And I do believe that the better the good direction gets, the more you'll see people desire that as well. And I would also say, even for those who go to the other side, I believe it will lead to depression, isolation, and a lack of meaning. And in that state, they might start looking for something better, and things might turn around. So just looking at the trajectory we're on, this is how I see society developing right now. Another question, Cynthia RK, you're saying too far left, too far right makes a circle and they become the same. It is often true that when you push things to extremes, they tend to flip. The extremities on both sides look very similar to each other. I would even say that if you understand, I mentioned before the spectrum of power between the absolute government and no government sides. right, tell me right now, if tomorrow we achieved the anarchistic dream, we've eliminated government, right? No more order, no more organization, anarchy. What will happen immediately? Someone will seize control of it immediately. As soon as you have anarchy, you're going to have someone step up and declare, you know what, I'm the leader now. And it might be a government, it might be a gang, it might be a criminal organization. The factor you have all government, all social order emerges from anarchy. That's the reality of it. Typically, it emerges within the first set of people joining together and forming a force of any kind. It could be a religion. It could be a gang. It could be somebody who actually does want to help the society and tries to form a government. And you'll find that the first instance of people joining forces, they will in an anarchistic society, they will automatically become the most powerful force. So anarchy will not last more than a day. If anarchy is achieved, it will not last more than a day. Even if it went fully into like anarcho-capitalism, you would watch big businesses become the new kings. They would become the kings. They would become the rulers. And you'd be living, instead of under, president whoever or king whoever, you'd be living under, the almighty CEO who would be the one dictating your rights or lack thereof. You know what I mean? Hey, maybe they'll say, hey, slavery's back on the menu, boys, or something like that. Because that's what it looks like immediately when that happens. And so to that point, it is true. The extremities will generate the opposite. Extreme absence of government will immediately lead to the creation of probably tyrannical government. Immediately. And history has shown this also, by the way. Let's see, another question. Echo Peak Bicycling. You're saying, I like how our educators have played word games over the word socialist over the years. So a lot of that came through the Frankfurt School, actually. So, all right, a bit of history lesson. The Frankfurt School, the school to study communism, individuals like Herbert Marcuse and so on, they went, of course, to, it's in New York, one of the big universities in New York. They established what was called the Frankfurt School, and they wrote books to basically redefine political spectrums. So I believe it was called The Authoritarian Mind or something like that. I can't remember the name of the exact book. But what they did was redefined socialism and redefined fascism. Because here's what was important. Prior to World War II, the communists and the Nazis were fully aligned. Joseph Stalin and Adolf Hitler were buddies. They were fully aligned. The Soviet Union was the leader of the global communist movement, the Comintern. The Nazis were part of that. They were 100% on the same group, board, everything. Same thing with Mussolini and the fascists. It was understood at the time that fascism and Nazism were just brands of socialism. And even among people in the United States, they were praising it as a functioning form of socialism. There were a lot of people who wanted it. There were movements to even bring it here to the United States, in fact. And so the communist movement that was even very active in the United States was very positive on Nazism prior to World War II. It was only when Hitler and Stalin had a falling out that the global communist movement, the Comintern, rejected the Nazis. It was only then. But politically, ideologically, it was fully understood they were basically the same system. If anything, it was a battle of leaders, not of systems. The systems were almost the same. And so that presented a big problem after World War II because you had the denazification movement. Now, the communists here in the United States, guys like Herbert Marcuse and those guys at the Frankfurt School, That was a big problem for them. Because if there was a rejection of Nazism and people understood the Nazis were National Socialists, the rejection of Nazism would have also meant a rejection of socialism and communism. They did not want that. So they redefined everything. They redefined the difference between Nazis and communists merely as a spectrum of nationalism or internationalism. A stupid argument, by the way, because again, a lot of the communist countries were deeply nationalistic internally. But because they were with the Comintern, the Communist International, right? The globalist communist movement, and many, even leading up to the collapse of the Soviet Union, a lot of them just became the new European leadership, the communists, and they became the United Nations leadership, right? And a lot of that was through Alger Hiss, of course, and being a communist spy with the Soviets, who helped create all of that. Anyways, brief history on this. The point is that in order to prevent a global rejection of communism, the communists had to separate the Nazis from the communist movement. And that was done through the Frankfurt School. Were that not done, people would have recognized, oh, right, it's the exact same thing. It's the exact same thing, just very mildly different ways of implementing it. But the reality is, communism is implemented in accordance with the unique traits of every culture. That's why Maoism is different from Stalinism, and Stalinism is different from Leninism, and Leninism is different from Trotskyism, and Trotskyism is different from the Owenites, and the Owenites were different from, Hitler, and Hitler was different from Mussolini. But they were all basically the same. It was all based on the same basic theories: absolute control, state capitalism, where the government controls the businesses, the elimination of basically all rights of the individual, and this idea of absolute collectivism. In fact, Mussolini himself said that under the fascist state, the individual will not have the antisocial right to rebel against the collective. They were collectivists. It was exactly the same. There was no difference. And so, that being said, the redefinition unfortunately made its way into the school systems in the United States because of the influence, notably, of Herbert Marcuse and the Frankfurt School, and the fact that a lot of the heads of agencies came out of that same movement. A lot of the hippies became the educators. A lot of the hippies became your new politicians. There was just a one-way street where a lot of the influencers of that movement, which was influenced by Marcuse and the Frankfurt School, they made their way into different agencies and government groups and so on, and they're the ones pulling the strings on policy. And so that interpretation, the revisionist history, became the history that most people know. It's fake. It is a fake revision that was meant to protect communism from collapse. That is what really happened. Anyways, folks, okay, I'm sorry to say this. I will not be here tomorrow. I've been called in for civic duty. I can't get out of it. So I'll be back again on Monday. Tomorrow I have to fulfill my duty as a citizen of the United States, and I have civic duty. So I will not have a show tomorrow. I deeply apologize for that. That being said, join me again on Monday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time, for another great episode of Crossroads. In the comments, let me know what you think. Were you aware of the Frankfurt School growing up? Were you aware of kind of revisionist history? Are you in school right now yourself? Do you see a change in culture where kids are becoming more aware of this stuff? Do you see the change? Let me know. I'm curious, actually, what you're seeing on your sides. That said, folks, thank you so much for being here. Please don't forget to like and share this episode. It really helps us. If you're on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe. It helps us a lot also. And that said, as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.